Hi everyone, welcome to LMF Talks, DE and I. Today we are talking about what businesses can do to foster inclusive cultures, and we have Hephzi Pemberton with us, who has written a new book that we are going to talk about. But rather than myself introducing her, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. Please tell everybody who you are, what you do, and a little bit more about your book, which is all through the diversity, inclusion and business, before we jump into the questions. For those who are watching, please do ask questions. We'll be able to see them as they come up via the comments board, and we can definitely answer all of them and share and care.
Great. Well, thanks, Sonya. It's lovely to be with you today on the launch day of the Diversity Playbook. I'm Hephzi Pemberton. I'm the author of the Diversity Playbook. I'm also the founder and CEO of Equality Group, which is a strategy consultancy and search firm focused on diversity and inclusion and equity for the finance and technology industries. And the reason I wrote the Diversity Playbook is because I think more businesses need to lead on this topic, and I wanted to take the insights that I have learned and developed over building the Equality Group and over the course of my career to a broader and wider audience, not only for the clients that we work with, but also for any other organisation that really sees the value in diversity and inclusion and wants to know practically what they can do that will really work.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And so if we can unpack just slightly about you writing and the journey that you've been on, I can only imagine that what you started writing has changed, or it's progressed, or it's evolved over the last 12 months or 18 months. So do you think that has D&I really changed in the last 12 to 18 months? Like, that's the first question, right? And we're just gonna go into it. And so those who are watching, please ask questions, and we'll kind of answer them as well as we go along.
I think DE&I, fundamentally what they are hasn't changed, that the principles are the same, but the awareness level and maybe even the education levels to some extent have increased as a result of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, especially when it comes to racial inequality. That has really climbed up the agenda, and I was, it's tragic circumstances, but very pleased to see it, because so much of the time the diversity conversation was getting stuck at white women and white middle class women as well. And I think it needed to move beyond that. And we not only needed to look at other diversity demographics, we also needed to look at the topics of inclusion and equity. So justice and equality. I mean, the list goes on.
The list goes on, absolutely.
Yeah, we needed to move forward, and that was a real impetus to move the conversation forward. And it showed where there was a lack of conversation and a lack of understanding. And those gaps have started to be plugged more in the last 12 months in a way that I don't think we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you've said. Absolutely. The conversation had to evolve. It had to progress. The challenges are more from an intersectional lens. It's not just because you are a woman that it's a one size fits all approach. It's everybody needs to be focusing on, and we can only focus once we're educated on what the different intersectionalities mean, and therefore how we can do better as a business. So based on what you found through your research, do you have anything anecdotally that you can share with us? Any advice that you have for businesses? I mean, what can companies therefore be doing better? And how should they be progressing with the times when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that companies can be doing better, but I think critically, and one of the main messages of the Diversity Playbook is that D&I should move into the core strategic area of a business. It is not just an HR issue, not only an HR issue, it links into many other aspects of the business: product development, marketing, branding, reputation management. It's multifaceted, and when it's done well and it is embedded in that way across the organization, it has real business benefits and value, the benefits of innovation, productivity, profitability, and so businesses that do that well and really understand it as a core part of their business, just like other sustainability topics, start to see the long-term benefits of doing that and the real business value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wasn't a McKinsey study, I believe, that said your profits can increase by 33%? Forbes and BCG Group says something like 17%, but I'm sure you know the stats from the top of your head far more than I do. And fundamentally, businesses are what focused on the P's, like the profit, the people, the productivity, the processes, the policies, yes. But in order for you to be profitable, you need to get your people in line. And really to do that, we need to have a diversity playbook to really know what our businesses are doing, what we're approaching, what we can do to do better. So if we go into your book slightly, why did you feel that you wanted to write about this topic? Why is it that you wrote a whole book about it? I mean, by that means, I mean, you could have done webinars, you could have done workshops, you could have done educational forums. What was it in that book in contextual format that really drove you to spend time writing a book? And as someone who's just written a book, I completely appreciate how taxing it can be, and how tiring it can be. So do you mind giving us a little bit more information as to what is your book about and why did you choose to write it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, having read a lot of the literature in the space, I felt there was a gap for something very practical that drew upon the very rich body of academic research that is out there, but also had business case studies that anyone reading could really appreciate and understand and relate to. And so combining both academic research with business case studies, with obviously the experience that I have through advising and working with companies on this topic, I thought a really sort of practical how to do this, what actually works, here's the evidence base and the data, go do, would be really valuable. And originally I thought, well, it will be something like 10 to 15,000. It's actually ended up at 30,000, but it is structured in a way that it's like a manual with some very accessible case studies that anyone in a business can really get stuck into and also take back to their teams and start to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just earlier today, and this may be an interesting one to comment on, LinkedIn shared that fundamentally people are going out and looking for new job roles. But in the same perspective, they shared, well, how can they be looking for new jobs roles when the jobs aren't there or the skill set isn't there? So LinkedIn News says vacancies in the UK are surging, and analysts say that many sectors, including IT and hospitality, are facing skill shortages. Does that mean that it's a good time to be graduating? They also had an article, and the BBC had an article earlier this week on Monday that said, we have so many jobs available, but we don't have the people for it. We don't have the skills. My feedback was the skills exist, the talent exists. Companies need to diversify their talent pool. They need to allow for different experiences and perspective and transferable skills in. But most importantly, they need to go out of this privilege zone 1 to 4 in London, right? Like we need to really diversify who we're going to. Based on the fact that roles are apparently surging and the digital skills aren't there or skills gap isn't there, what is some practical advice that you have for companies who are hiring, who are recruiting, and who are really trying to foster inclusive cultures?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that question, Sonya. So I'll take the sort of what you do on the recruitment and the hiring side, and I do agree with you. I think where often companies will say that the pipeline isn't there, that actually it's just a limit of the pipeline they currently have. That often you can plug into new networks, be more creative, maybe even about how you're scoping your role in terms of what are the key skills, capabilities, requirements you're really looking for? Even thinking in terms of how are we structuring this role? Does this need to be one person? Could this in fact be a job share for 2 or 3? And, allowing flexibility and other criteria around it, as you say, moving into different regional locations for sourcing and applicants. So absolutely the pipeline funnel building. So often there's a lot of work that could still be done there. But then there's a lot that can be done through the recruitment process as well to reduce bias. You can never completely remove bias, but reduce it and optimize for diverse talent. And I talk a lot about that in chapter 5 of the book. The stages of the recruitment process, making sure you have very structured interview questions, that you don't move into sort of interview fatigue, that you make sure that you have wisdom of the crowd, where you can, that you anonymize key signifying data at the beginning on the CV. So a lot of different examples of things that help to reduce bias and have been proven and shown that you get better results for diverse talent coming through those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And, we've got some great comments coming through, some great questions coming through, which is awesome. As a young professional, as somebody who's potentially just graduated, not me myself, but in terms of context and scenario, for a fresh graduate who's looking for their first role, what are some of the tips and tricks that you advise they do to reach out to an employer who they would like to work for, but aren't quite sure if they are diverse or they're inclusive or they really are doing what we need them to do?
Yeah. I think you can tell a lot. So there's two sides to that question. First of all, what should you do when you're judging whether an employer is inclusive? And then if they are, like, what should you do to reach out? So I'll take it in that order. So the first point is that I think you can tell there's a lot available online now. And I think you can tell a lot, not everything, but you can tell a lot from what's on a company website and on their social media channels, and what they've actually been doing. Like, do they have a sustainability and ESG report? What is in there? Do they have any diversity data? Do they have employee networks and resource groups? Like, what are they actually doing to foster an inclusive and diverse workforce? Because if you can't see anything, it's not that nothing is going on, because I so often work with companies. I'm like, please, will you tell people what you're doing? Because they want to know and they need to know. But the ones that are putting it out there are probably doing even more than you're seeing. So I think that is a good barometer. And then if you do like a company, you like what they're doing and you're interested in working for them, I think the more proactive you can be, the better. And of course, I think many of us know this research where women will often, if they don't meet 100% of the job description, then they'll discount themselves, whereas men are much more comfortable even at 50% of the job criteria. So I think you have to really boost your self-confidence in the job search process. You have to also make sure you get mentors, make sure you get people that are working in the industry that you want to go into, and ask them for their time and be proactive about that, because all of those conversations and insights that you can get from informal conversations and relationships will all feed in to that interview process when you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the research that we conducted via the LMF network early in the year, one found that over 95% believe that diversity and inclusion practices, especially hiring practices, that have biases. And we found that from a social mobility standpoint, the reason why participants don't feel that they are ready to apply for job roles is, one, because of the lack of training around confidence, two, the lack of information around the career itself, and three, negotiation skills. So absolutely, to your point, mentoring is such an important subject area. I mean, the stats tell us that mentors are more likely to mentor people that look and feel like them, and so are hiring managers. And so if a lot of the spaces are maintained by those who we would identify as white middle-class men, just based on history, we need to make sure that we can diversify those spaces through mentoring programs such as the one we run, such as the book that you've kind of proposed and written in terms of Diversity Playbook and the culture aspect, but also focusing on going back and looping back. It's the skills. It's what skills are you hiring for? Where can you find them? And how are we really helping not just to hire diverse talent, but to retain them?
Yes.
Because retention is such a key.
It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. The leaky pipeline is a problem across industries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let people jump into your book for the kind of the solution to that. We've had a great question from Aditya that says, what should startups do to harness more diverse and inclusive cultures?
Well, startups have an amazing opportunity because they're in like a high growth phase and they can bake DE&I in from the early days. So I think giving a lot of thought to your people and talent processes, thinking about actually what are the processes that we're designing, who are they for, and how well do they work? And I talk a lot about that in the book. So I talk about the entire talent journey. So from hiring, recruitment through to reviews, retention, promotion, succession. All of these are such critical junctures, and you can lose great people, anyone, but especially it seems that diverse talent drops out at those, middle and senior levels. And so I think as a startup, you can be really mindful about your people processes, how you're designing them. Don't just take the templates that you've known and are familiar with from previous employers. Really think creatively about that. And that's the beauty of, building a business and being able to have, more of a blank canvas. And I think you're also getting a handle of your data, because you can do that from the very beginning. So, asking for that demographic information, making it clear why it's valuable to you, thinking about what are the inclusion metrics that you're going to measure, what's important to your business, and just embedding that into your annual processes.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. We've had a great comment come through. And if I mispronounce your name, please tell me off and teach me how to pronounce it. Iofi, I believe that's how you pronounce it, says, I completely agree. I'm a single parent and an autistic child. I currently work during the school hours in company that I work for is great. Have an employee system, great mentors and mental health first aiders. Absolutely. From a company's perspective, small wins make for big leaps, right? Small wins are mental health first aiders. It's acknowledgement that there's a lot going on right now in the world, checking on your people, asking if they're okay, making sure that your practices are inclusive. Really small example being, don't have meetings before 10 a.m. and don't have meetings after 3 p.m. Let people go and do the school run. If they want to start late, let them start late. If they want to wake up and exercise, give them time to do so. Also, I've always said, and I kind of really want to, tone into this, every company should have maybe an hour's lunch for its effort. I'm so sorry, effort. I've mispronounced your name, but I apologize, and hopefully I've corrected it. Another thing we can do is make sure that everyone has a lunch break. I don't know about you, but as a business owner and as somebody who manages a team, sometimes I forget to have lunch. And actually, that's the most basic practice when you're trying to be inclusive, when you're trying to foster inclusive cultures. So as we have the questions coming
Sonya,
in,
can I just pick up on what you're saying there, because I think there's
absolutely.
a really important, I mean, there's lots of important points, but
yes,
one
yes,
particular point is about leadership role modeling the behavior that they want to see. And one of the key ways that you foster an inclusive culture, so coming back to that startup question, if you are in the leadership team for that startup, you need to lead from the front. You need to become more inclusive yourself if you're going to expect your organization to be inclusive and other people within the company to do so. So yeah, whether that's exactly about just honoring people's time off and breaks and good workday patterns and mental health, then you have to look to yourself first. And I sort of start the book on that note.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. So leading by design, leading by discovery, being a change leader with your own business, then, as you've written a book and you very much amplify and advocate D&I, how have you learned some kind of or progressed some changes within your own business that you'd be comfortable sharing just based on what you've learned over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had to go through so much adaptation, as many businesses have in the last year. I mean, we were a remote first company before going into COVID, and I sort of designed it intentionally that way. But being remote only was quite a big transition, actually. And we had to put in place certain points in the week where we could touch base, where there were opportunities for connecting and sharing. And like, my personality type is I don't know if people do Myers-Briggs or the DISC profile, but I'm like a classic sort of D, like a more like a direct. I want to get things done. I'm very much wanting action, and that's not the entirety of my team, thank God, because that's part of diversity. But actually, although I want to just see results, I want to get things done, there's other people in the team that just need a bit more time together. And actually, it's been so great to listen to what other people need, how they want to structure it, and finding that middle ground together so that everyone feels that this is a work environment where they can flourish and where they can thrive. So it so often starts with just open forum conversation. Ask the question. Your team has the answer. You will not have the answer for them. So if ever in doubt, ask. And even when not in doubt, I would say every leader should be just asking for more and more feedback. And the sort of more honest and brutal the feedback is, the better, to be honest. So I love it when the team say, like, this isn't working very well, or why haven't you thought of this? and that's where you get the improvement and the innovation.
Absolutely. And do you talk about leadership and what leaders can be doing within your book as well?
Yes.
Absolutely.
A lot. I think so much of this does come down to leadership, but I wouldn't say leaders are only the people that are in the leadership roles. I think on this topic, there are some just phenomenal leaders and change agents that are at any level of a company, but they are educated, they are equipped, they build consensus around them, and they can really affect quite incredible change. And I've seen that at a couple of recent clients we've worked with, where finally the management team and the board are like, oh, we can't ignore this any longer. And that's because of a handful of people in the organization that have been pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so just a little bit about your book. So it's called Diversity Playbook. Where is it that we can find it, and where is it right now available? I know I saw a message to say, was it on Kindle?
So it's on Amazon, and it's paperback, hardback, and Kindle.
Okay.
Today there is a special Kindle offer for 99p just to launch it and get it out into as many people's hands as possible.
Okay.
So yeah, you can just search Diversity Playbook. I'll also post the link on here.
Yes.
And yeah, that's available today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And as we end and come to our final question, what are, in your opinion, the top 3 tips that companies can do to create a diversity playbook, and really to foster and build an inclusive culture?
So top 3 is hard, but I will say I think you need a clear and robust strategy that articulates the business value of doing this, because everyone in a business can get on board with that at any level. You need to really get on top of your data, and you need to stay on top of it, and you need to measure it and make sure that you are progressing it. And if you're not, get to the bottom of why not. And the third thing is a more subtle point, but I think extremely important for fostering inclusive cultures, which is around meetings. I think meetings are a fascinating lens into the microculture of a business. Meetings happen all the time, probably too much of the time, but how they are run, who is speaking, how long they're speaking for, who's chairing, all these points. And I talk about this in the final chapter. If you look into that and you answer those questions, I think you can tell a lot about how inclusive or not an organization is. And that's one of the subtle changes you can make that can start to lead to quite significant changes down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, for telling us about your book. For anyone still listening, and for those who are listening afterwards, I'm also going to post a link at the bottom so you can go grab it. 99 pence today, as it's the launch date, June the 8th. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to take a read. And please, I encourage everyone to follow Hephzi and the Equality Group so that you can learn more about D&I and really be the business that's fostering the inclusive culture moving forward.
Thanks, Sonya.